Most teachers go into teaching because it's a movement of the heart. You don't go into teaching to get rich and famous. You go into teaching because you have a passion about a subject and about students and about showing students this new window to the world.
The first day in the classroom as a brand new teacher is unforgettable. After years of study, at last you have the opportunity to educate and nurture young minds. But all too often, and all too soon, the passion to teach is lost in a bog of paperwork, problems, and politics. Parker Palmer is a writer and teacher who addresses the issues that affect the teacher and the classroom.
Public school teachers are certainly a good example of folks who have a lot of projections laid on them. In our society, we ask public school teachers to solve all of the problems that no other institution knows how to solve. And then we blame them for not being able to do that. If a teacher absorbs all of those projections and goes around feeling either on the one hand guilty and inadequate, or on the other hand bitter and angry, both of those things drain the person of the heart to teach.
How can teachers get past their loss of heart and find purpose in what they do? The Southwest Educational Development Laboratory, through its work with teachers across the Southwest, has found 3 key strategies that help teachers find gratification and restore the meaning to teaching. One strategy is to shift the focus from your teaching to the learning needs of your students. Teacher and researcher Karen Gallus has spent many years listening to children and writing about how they learn. She's found that shifting focus helps teachers understand what their students are telling them.
Once we really start looking at children and inquiring into what they're telling us and what they're understanding, we also have to pay attention to the things that motivate them and drive their learning.
When teachers know what motivates their students, they can see them as learners. But teachers get distracted by day-to-day frustrations. Too little time, too many students, and mountains of paperwork. Vicki Brown, a pre-K to 5th grade science teacher, was frustrated by the many demands that complicated her students' learning experiences.
It's easy to become frustrated as teachers because we have so many demands placed on us, not only from the curriculum we're to teach, but we have children who may have physical or emotional needs or social needs that are not being met in another area.
Like Vicki, most teachers face similar challenges to classroom learning. Vicki got past her frustrations when she shifted focus to her students and looked more closely at their needs. She was delighted by what happened.
As I shifted into that area of focusing more on their needs, I started having those successes with the children. When that one child says, hey, either I've got something I didn't have, the light bulb goes on and it all clicks and it's like, oh, this is easy. After they've been struggling, that's what you're here for. To see these children finally realize for themselves it becomes their own. I can do this. I worked hard. It wasn't easy for me, but you know what? I had someone who believed in me, and I was able to learn. And from this, now I'm excited.
In the case of Judy Courageous, a 4th grade teacher, she encountered a student whose emotional needs created a barrier between her teaching and his learning.
With this particular child, the frustration level was so high because I felt that I was not reaching him. I didn't know how to reach him. I didn't feel like I had the proper tools, the proper, not just physical tools, but mental tools. I felt like my heart was in the right place, but I needed to get my heart and my mind together so that I knew what to do and how to do it for this little boy. We would have instances of tremendous confrontation to the point that the child had to be physically removed on several occasions. My first reaction was, maybe I should just sit down and cry. And then I knew I couldn't do that because I was not serving a purpose for him.
As long as Judy focused on this student's actions and how she handled his tantrums, she couldn't reach him. When she shifted her focus to him, she discovered what he needed from her to allow him to learn.
Early on, I was not very compassionate. when it came to this particular child, because I felt like, quote unquote, he was just a spoiled little brat. You understand? And then as we went farther and farther, and we got more history and we got more appropriate data, I was able to refocus myself and say, you know what? This child needs help. He needs kindness. He needs tenderness. He also needs that strictness and that thing that says he's not going to run over me. But by the same token, he needs that extra pat on the back that says, you've done good today.
Karen's classroom confrontation involved a group of boys trying to control the dynamics of the group.
I think I really first started to notice it when I was working in sharing time, trying to put into place a new way of looking at sharing time with my class, in which the child who was sharing would sit in my chair and I would sit in the audience and participate as an audience member. And I remember the first time that I noticed when an African-American girl was in the chair and she was sharing, and she got ready to tell a story, and the little boys basically said, oh, this is boring. It was about 3 of them. And they literally turned their backs on her and laid down on the floor. And that just, to me, was the height of insult, because we had spent so much time trying to have everybody respectfully participate in sharing.
Rather than focus on her control over the situation as a teacher, Karen shifted her focus to the boys themselves. Once she understood what they were doing, she could help them learn.
I began to think about trying to look at them a little more closely and figure out what were they doing, because I really wasn't sure. Once I can see them clearly and see their purposes and their fears and their strengths, and once they're willing to show that in front of their friends because they know it's a safe place, then I know how to proceed. But to do that, I also had to be able to do that myself. I had to be able to give up some of the, what we call inherent power in being a teacher, some of that control, and I had to show them myself as a learner. I had to be learning with them.
Like these teachers, you can shift the focus from what you do to what your students learn. Hear yourself less. Hear your children more. By listening and watching, you will begin to understand your students and better meet their needs as learners. This process isn't simple, but the rewards are well worth it. Another strategy to restore meaning to teaching is to talk with your colleagues about educational issues and ideas.
I think it's about learning to be human in the presence of other human beings and having a kind of conversation with fellow teachers, with people who understand your situation, that isn't a gripe session or isn't a searching for what's the fix that's going to make all this right, but it's a long, slow process of truth-telling, of saying, this is how it is for me, this is who I am.
You would think in a school full of teachers you would have ample opportunity to share your thoughts with others. But days can go by without meaningful conversation with your colleagues. It's especially difficult if, like Vicki, your classroom is isolated in the